Imagine a man so terrifying that even inside one of America's toughest prisons, guards refuse to turn their backs on him. A man who doesn't just kill, he performs cruelty like an artist, smiling through every detail as if pain is entertainment. This isn't a character from a horror film. This is Jaime Osuna, one of the most sadistic, unpredictable, and cold-blooded prisoners the world has ever seen. From the moment he stepped into the criminal world, Osuna made one thing clear. He wasn't driven by anger or revenge. He was driven by enjoyment. He wore skulls on his face, tattoos of demons, and a smile that told everyone around him that he felt nothing. No sympathy, no fear, no remorse. Interviews with him left detectives shaken. He spoke about torture the way others speak about hobbies. Inside prison, he became even more dangerous. He studied people, waited for chances, and proved that metal bars cannot contain true evil. His darkest act, committed inside a locked cell, shocked the entire nation and revealed just how far his inner darkness could go. Welcome to the disturbing world of Jaime Osuna, where fear has a face and evil has a smile. Jaime Osuna's story begins long before the world knew his name, in a childhood filled with the kind of violence that shapes monsters. He was born into an environment where fear lived in every corner, where shouting and chaos were daily realities, and where safety simply did not exist. From a very young age, he was exposed to abuse, neglect, and emotional trauma that no child should ever experience. Teachers noticed something was wrong. Osuna never acted like other kids. While others laughed and played, he seemed consumed by something darker, something he couldn't control. His temper was unpredictable, and his fascination with pain, both his own and others, began to show early. Neighbors later recalled moments when young Osuna would sit alone for hours, staring into nothing, completely disconnected from the world. He wasn't shy, he was cold. Instead of forming friendships, he pushed people away. Instead of seeking comfort, he leaned into isolation. This emotional detachment became the foundation of his personality. His mother, overwhelmed and struggling, couldn't stop the storm building inside him. His father's violent behavior only added fuel to a fire that was already consuming the boy from within. As he grew older, Osuna's behavior became more disturbing. He was fascinated with weapons, with horror stories, and with anything that hinted at power through violence. Classmates remembered him drawing dark sketches or carving strange shapes into desks. What seemed like odd behavior at the time would soon become chilling foreshadowing. Osuna wasn't just troubled. He was evolving into something dangerous. By his teenage years, the darkness inside him was impossible to hide. He started experimenting with self-harm, leaving scars on his body as if they were badges of honor. He talked about death casually, almost with admiration. His emotional response to suffering, his own or others, was numb. Therapists who saw him described him as a child with a black void where empathy should be. But without consistent support or intervention, his mind continued to twist in on itself, feeding the fantasies he kept hidden from the world. During this period, Osuna discovered something that shaped his identity forever. Serial killers. He didn't fear them, he idolized them. He studied their methods, their interviews, their reasons for killing. He admired their control, their fearlessness, and the terror they created. In his mind, he wasn't just learning, he was preparing. He wanted to join their ranks, not as a follower, but as someone even more extreme, someone unforgettable. Home offered no stability, school offered no escape, and society failed to see what was growing in front of them. And in this void of guidance and love, Jaime Osuna embraced the one thing he understood: violence. His transformation wasn't sudden. It was slow, deliberate, and terrifying. Every year, the darkness inside him grew sharper, stronger, and more confident. By the time he stepped into adulthood, he wasn't just damaged, he was becoming a predator. By the time Jaime Osuna reached his early 20s, he had already crossed lines that most people never even approach. The chaos of his childhood evolved into a ruthless adult who operated with disturbing confidence. On the streets, Osuna developed a reputation. People whispered about him long before he ever appeared on police radar. He wasn't loud, he wasn't reckless. He was controlled, calculated, and strangely charismatic. That combination made him even more dangerous. He could charm people, gain their trust, and then reveal a side of himself that felt almost inhuman. Osuna's crimes didn't begin with murder. They escalated slowly, each act more violent than the one before, like he was testing how far he could go without being caught. He assaulted people without remorse, threatened those who tried to stand up to him, and seemed to enjoy the fear he created. But it wasn't enough. He wanted more than dominance. He wanted suffering. He wanted to feel like the architect of someone's worst nightmare. Eventually, his violent urges exploded into something irreversible. When he committed the murder that would finally land him in prison, investigators were stunned by what they saw. The crime scene was unlike anything they expected. It looked like a place where torture wasn't just inflicted, but admired. There were signs of deliberate cruelty, as if every wound had been carefully planned. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a ritual of violence. The victim's final moments were defined by fear, pain, and the cold precision of a man who felt nothing. When police finally arrested Osuna, they found him disturbingly calm. He didn't try to hide. He didn't resist. Instead, he behaved like a man who had been waiting for this moment. Inside the interrogation room, he treated the detectives like spectators. He spoke casually, almost proudly, about what he had done. He described details no one asked for, smiling as he relived the cruelty. For the officers listening, it was clear. They weren't dealing with a killer driven by rage or desperation. They were dealing with someone who enjoyed the suffering he caused. As the investigation continued, more disturbing facts surfaced. Witnesses came forward about his threatening behavior in the weeks leading up to the murder. People who knew him said he shifted moods like a switch, calm one moment, terrifying the next. What shocked detectives most was his complete lack of remorse. There was no guilt, no fear of consequences, not even a moment of hesitation. He looked them in the eyes and told them the only regret he had was not doing more. The courtroom offered no humanity from him either. Throughout the trial, Osuna behaved like he was performing, smirking at cameras, taunting prosecutors, and acting as if the entire process was entertainment. Reporters described him as a man who feeds on attention. The verdict was inevitable, but for Osuna, prison wasn't the end. It was merely his next stage, one where his darkness would grow even more terrifying. Prison is designed to break the spirits of dangerous men. But for Jaime Osuna, stepping behind bars felt like stepping onto a stage built just for him. Instead of shrinking inside the system, he thrived. His eerie tattoos, especially the skull-like markings across his face, immediately made him stand out. Inmates whispered his name long before they knew anything about his crimes, because his appearance alone announced who he believed he was. Someone beyond human, someone embracing pure evil. Guards quickly labeled him unpredictable, while other prisoners kept their distance, sensing something in him that was far more dangerous than a normal violent inmate. Osuna treated prison like an opportunity to deepen his identity. He bragged about his crimes not out of arrogance, but out of enjoyment. He talked with a calmness that scared even seasoned correctional officers, his voice steady, his eyes cold, and his smile constant. He studied every move around him, guard patterns, inmate routines, even the smallest changes in behavior. Nothing escaped his attention. It was as if he was always waiting, always calculating, always searching for his next moment to unleash the darkness inside him. Media attention only fueled him. When reporters interviewed him, expecting remorse or explanation, they instead found a man who took pleasure in describing pain. He taunted the judicial system, mocked his victims, and spoke about violence like a hobby. Every interview revealed the same disturbing truth. Osuna didn't see himself as a criminal. He saw himself as a performer of pain, someone who believed suffering was art. He wanted the world to fear him, to recognize him, to speak his name with dread. And inside prison, he began crafting that legacy. Other inmates avoided sharing space with him. Even gang members, men who lived with violence their whole lives, told guards they didn't want to be near him. They said something about him felt wrong, as if he enjoyed hurting people in a way they couldn't understand. He didn't get angry like normal inmates. He didn't lash out in bursts. Instead, he was patient, silent, watching. It was that stillness that made him terrifying. Prison officials tried multiple strategies, monitoring him closely, restricting his movement, separating him from others. But Osuna adapted. He manipulated guards, acted calm during evaluations, and pretended to cooperate just enough to avoid being treated as an immediate threat. Deep down, everyone knew he was waiting for the right opportunity. In solitary interviews, psychologists labeled him one of the most dangerous personalities they had ever encountered. Someone incapable of empathy, someone who felt pleasure where others felt horror. But despite warnings, the system wasn't prepared for the full extent of what Osuna could do. He had already learned how to navigate prison life, how to hide his intentions, and how to strike when no one expected it. Inside those walls, Osuna wasn't forgotten. He was evolving, sharpening his cruelty, preparing for the act that would cement him as one of the most evil prisoners in modern history. The moment prison officials decided to place another inmate inside Jaime Osuna's cell, they unknowingly set the stage for one of the most horrifying nights in California correctional history. The man chosen to share that confined space was Luis Romero, an inmate serving time for robbery. A criminal, yes, but nothing close to the monster he was about to live beside. Romero had no reason to expect danger. He wasn't told about Osuna's psychological profile, his violent obsessions, or the warnings issued by mental health staff. To Romero, Osuna was just another prisoner. To Osuna, Romero was an opportunity. From the moment Romero entered the cell, the atmosphere changed. Osuna watched him with a calm, predator-like stare, the kind that makes instinct scream but doesn't yet explain why. Guards later said they noticed nothing unusual that night. Osuna didn't make noise, didn't cause trouble, didn't give even a hint of the horror he was planning. He was silent, polite, and fully in control, behaving exactly the way a predator behaves before it strikes. What happened inside that cell over the next several hours was so brutal that even seasoned officers struggled to describe it. Osuna attacked while Romero was asleep, instantly overpowering him. But he didn't simply kill him. He tortured him in ways that defied comprehension. The scene left behind was something investigators compared to a ritual, not a quick outburst of violence, but an extended, methodical act. Osuna took his time, inflicting pain with precision, as if he had been waiting for this moment for years. It was the darkest expression of the fantasies he had hinted at in interviews, fantasies no one took seriously enough. When morning came and officers opened the cell, the air shifted from routine to horror. Romero lay lifeless, mutilated beyond recognition. Osuna sat calmly beside the body, covered in blood yet disturbingly composed. He smiled at the officers, a slow, chilling smile that said everything they needed to know. He had enjoyed every second of the night. He reportedly told them, "It was fun," a phrase that sent waves of shock through the entire facility. The prison went into crisis mode. How could such a dangerous man be housed with another inmate? Why were warnings ignored? Why was he not placed under restrictions that matched his psychological profile? The questions kept growing, and every answer pointed to failure. Failure to assess him. Failure to monitor him. Failure to protect Romero from a man who had openly declared he wanted to kill again. For investigators, this wasn't just another prison murder. It was a wake-up call. They realized that Osuna wasn't merely dangerous. He was uncontrollable. He didn't act out of anger or impulse. He acted out of desire. Romero's death was not a reaction. It was an expression. And it proved beyond any doubt that even behind thick steel doors and armed guards, Osuna's darkness couldn't be contained. The aftermath of Luis Romero's murder didn't just shake the prison system, it exposed its deepest flaws. Jaime Osuna's actions forced officials, investigators, and the public to confront a disturbing truth. Some individuals are so consumed by darkness that even the strongest walls cannot contain them. After the brutal killing, Osuna was immediately isolated, but the questions surrounding him only multiplied. Experts re-evaluated his psychological profile, and every conclusion pointed in the same direction. He was a textbook example of a psychopath with no capacity for empathy, guilt, or rehabilitation. He wasn't a product of circumstance anymore. He was a man who fully embraced the evil inside him. Legal teams, correctional staff, and psychologists all agreed there was no hope of changing him. He expressed zero remorse, telling investigators that he would kill again if given the opportunity. His voice carried no emotion, no anger, no justification, just the cold truth of someone who viewed murder as entertainment. This terrified everyone involved in the case. They realized they weren't dealing with a criminal who could be managed. They were dealing with someone who saw violence as a form of expression, someone who cared nothing for human life. The prison system faced a storm of criticism. How could a man with Osuna's history, his interviews, his threats, his open fascination with torture, ever be placed with another inmate? Families demanded answers. Advocacy groups called for reform. Officers who entered the cell that morning struggled with trauma. It wasn't just a failure of judgment. It was a failure that cost a man his life in the worst possible way. Media outlets across the nation began covering Osuna's case, portraying him as one of the most dangerous men behind bars. Yet Osuna fed on the attention. He smiled during hearings. He mocked journalists. He behaved as if every article, every headline, every shocked reaction proved his power over the world outside. In his mind, fear was victory. The more the public talked about him, the more he felt validated. Eventually, Osuna was placed in one of the most restricted environments possible, with constant monitoring and no physical access to other inmates. But even in near total isolation, his presence was felt. Officers reported he spent hours staring at walls, humming quietly, or talking to himself as if reliving the night of the murder. Every action reinforced what everyone already feared. His darkness wasn't fading. It was growing. In the years that followed, Jaime Osuna became a symbol of pure, unrestrained evil. His interviews remained chilling. His lack of humanity became a subject of psychological study. And his crimes continued to haunt both the families of victims and the people assigned to guard him. His story is a reminder that not every monster hides in the shadows. Some walk openly, smile confidently, and feel nothing as they destroy lives. And even when locked away, they leave a mark that time can never erase.